While everyone was tipsy and smiling in our house, I joked that they don't make them that tiny. And he heard every word. By morning, he was checked into the Marriott, and I was refreshing my messages, realizing silence can be louder than any argument. I'm Lena, 31, and up until last Saturday, I thought I had the roadmap figured out. 4 years married to Adrian, a steady setup that looked good from the outside and felt mostly fine on the inside. A gorgeous 3-bedroom we snagged 2 years back, with the kind of light that makes every morning look like a magazine spread. A tight circle of 6 couples from college who rotate dinner parties like clockwork. And a brand new promotion for Adrian that was supposed to level us up. Our crew is locked in. Group texts that never end, birthdays planned months out, the whole deal. And this month was our turn to host, which I'd been low-key hyped about because we'd just finished a kitchen redo I fought hard for. Adrian said it was too pricey, but I sold him on property value and told myself he'd thank me when an appraiser walked in someday. His promotion is one of those office ladder climbs that doesn't sound flashy, but bumps the paycheck in a real way. The catch is, he'll be on the road about 2 weeks out of every month, and when he told me I did the whole, "That's amazing, babe, I'm proud of you" speech, while, privately, I pictured a lot of nights with me at home and him in nice hotels, texting me room service photos. The money part? I won't pretend I'm mad about it. We could finally book that Greece trip I keep saving posts for, maybe even refresh the bathroom next. But the travel part had me chewing my lip a little. Brooke's the only one who really gets me. She's my call-at-midnight friend, the one who hears the stuff I don't say out loud. And, yeah, she knows more about Adrian and our private life than he'd ever guess. He's sensitive, and I don't think he'd love knowing I share the behind-the-scenes notes. But that's what best friends are for, right? Swapping the kind of details that make you feel seen. In our bedroom life, I tend to take the lead. And sometimes a little teasing is part of the dance. He's into that dynamic, I promise. And when I'm with Brooke, I'll joke about it like harmless banter, nothing in my head. Looking back, maybe I should have noticed how Adrian amps it up around our friends. Eager host energy, perfect platters, timing courses like a pro, while I work the room and toss compliments and, yeah, take a little credit when folks gush. Alone later, I'll nitpick a recipe he missed by a hair, but in public, I act like I'm the prize, and he's lucky to have me. And he plays along, so I took that as everything being fine. On party day, I was excited to finally show off the kitchen. Adrian went all in on the menu from the second he woke up, and I handled the vibe. Flowers from the farmer's jasonette, candles that make the place smell like a woodsy spa, a playlist that slides from old favorites to new without anyone noticing, because I wanted perfect. And if I'm honest, I also wanted Sabrina and Evan to feel a pinch of envy. Since last month, they wouldn't stop talking about their new pool. Folks rolled in around 7, and Adrian did his smooth host thing, pouring drinks, remembering who likes still or sparkling, making everyone comfortable. And I watched him from across the room thinking, okay, he's actually really good at this. Not that I'd feed his ego more than necessary. Let's just say it's big in some lanes and definitely not in others, if you catch my drift. I remember clocking him topping off glasses and thinking he had no idea what conversation I planned to have later, after the last guest left. With all that travel coming up, I was going to remind him about our arrangement for when he's gone. 2 weeks is a long stretch, and I have needs. And he always makes this little pout when I bring up the topic and hint that what he brings to the table isn't quite enough to keep me content over a long stretch. It's been our bit, a line we've danced on for a while. The night flowed, food landed right, people laughed in that easy way that says they feel at home, bottles got lighter, stories got better, and when Adrian talked about his promotion, I did the supportive spouse nods, the "we're so grateful" lines, the polished smiles, while inside, I was mentally spending the bonus on those designer boots I've been stalking online, and maybe a towel warmer because why not? The whole setup looked like a win from the outside, plates clean, glasses clinking, friends cozy, Adrian in his lane, and me already planning the next renovation in my head. When he brought up the travel, everybody leaned in like a panel of experts, tossing out questions about how we'd handle being apart that much. And then Evan tried to lighten it with a cheesy line about absence making the heart grow fonder, which got the room laughing, while Adrian gave that tight, uncomfortable smile he uses when he'd rather not be there and slipped off to the garage to grab more wine. The second he was out of earshot, the conversation shifted, because that's how our dinners run. The real talk always pops up when someone steps away, and that's exactly where the night unraveled, though I didn't see it coming, and if I had, I might have just sipped my drink and kept quiet, but I didn't, and now he won't even pick up when I call. We were all sunk into the couches after dessert, a little buzzed from the bottles Adrian had splurged on, which I told everyone I'd chosen because I love playing sommelier. Plates stacked, candles low, talk circling back to his new role and the schedule that came with it, with Sabrina gushing about how excited she was for us in that sweet voice that always sounds half performance to me, considering last month she couldn't stop bragging about Evan's big bonus. Monica, swirling her glass like a coach on a talk show, asked how I'd manage while he was gone so often. She and Jason juggle travel too, so she was in advice-giving mode, and I kept it vague with "we'll figure it out" because I truly didn't care to unpack that with her. And right then Chloe, who struggles to read a room on her best day, tossed in a line about ordering toys the same size so I could stay entertained when he was out of town, and people giggled, and I saw my chance to snag an easy laugh, so I rolled my eyes and said, "I don't think they make them that tiny," expecting the usual. Snorts, mock groans, Adrian doing the playful headshake, except this time everything froze. Evan half choked on his drink. Jason suddenly discovered urgent news on his phone. And that's when I noticed Adrian, standing in the doorway, wine bottle in hand, looking at me with a face I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, something heavier, like a switch had been flipped, and the lights went out behind his eyes. He set the bottle down very carefully, like the glass might explode if he breathed wrong, turned, and walked out. And a moment later, his car started in the driveway. I laughed a little to cut the tension and said he was being dramatic and would be right back after a loop around the block. But my stomach did a small, cold turn when nobody laughed with me. People were looking at me like I'd just kicked a puppy. "What?" I snapped, trying to force normal back into the room. It was a joke. We joke about that stuff all the time. And Evan muttered that we don't do that in front of everyone, which got him an elbow from Sabrina. And Brooke tried to smooth it with, "I'm sure he'll be back soon," except she wouldn't meet my eyes, which felt rich coming from someone who's told me plenty about her and Nate. The evening crumbled fast. Sudden early mornings appeared. Babysitters allegedly needed to be relieved, and within half an hour, the place was empty except for me, the candle smoke, and a mess of wine glasses and plates. I texted Adrian, "Way to embarrass me in front of everyone. When are you coming home?" No answer. Called and got voicemail. Tried again and got the same. And by midnight, I was pacing mad that he'd storm out over one joke, telling myself if he can't handle a little teasing that's on him. I rang Brooke for backup, expecting the usual best friend solidarity, and she hit me with, "You went too far this time, Lex," which made me say, "Excuse me," like she'd grown another head, and she told me I'd humiliated him in front of our whole circle about something really personal. I reminded her she's joked about Nate's stuff with me, and she said, "That's between us. I wouldn't say it in front of everyone we know." And that stung more than I wanted to admit, so I hung up, marched back to the kitchen, and stood there under the bright new lights I'd insisted on, listening to the quiet house, and telling myself he'd cool off, text me, and we'd laugh it off, even while some small voice kept replaying the look on his face when he set down the bottle and walked away. By sunrise, there was still nothing from Adrian. No call, no ping, not even a read receipt. And I kept bouncing between worry and anger, asking myself where he was sleeping, who he was talking to, and whether he was telling people I'd turned into a terrible wife over one offhand rejason. I was about to learn how fast one little joke can snowball into the worst week of your life. 3 full days crawled by before I heard from him. 3 days of me firing off texts that went from concerned to frustrated to flat-out angry, leaving voicemails that started calm and ended sharp and getting nothing back but silence. I called in sick because I looked rough from not sleeping, and my head kept looping the moment in our living room, like a replay I couldn't shut off, and I still didn't get why everyone acted like I'd set the house on fire. On day 3, he finally texted, "I'm coming by to get some clothes while you're at work tomorrow. No, I'm sorry, no, we should talk." Just to notice that he planned to slip in and out like an electrician. I shot back right away asking where he'd been and saying we needed to talk, and hours later he replied, "I'm staying at the Marriott downtown. I don't want to talk right now." And that hit me sideways, not even crashing with a friend, but booking a hotel room because his feelings were hurt over a joke. I rang Brooke thinking she'd have snapped out of whatever mood she was in and would back me up. But the second she hesitated, I knew she'd spoken to him. She said yes, and when I asked what he'd said, she told me he was really hurt and that it wasn't the first time I'd made comments like that in front of people. I called it ridiculous and said it was one joke, and she got quiet, then reminded me about New Year's when I told everyone he couldn't handle more than 2 drinks because he's built like a middle schooler, and the time I told Chloe he needed help opening jars. I brushed those off as jokes. Everybody ribs their spouse, and said Nate must do plenty she complains about, and she said sure, but she keeps that private and doesn't announce his insecurities to the whole circle. For a second doubt flickered, then I shoved it down and told her I didn't need that from her either, and she said she was being a friend by being honest, so I hung up feeling more alone than before. The next morning, I decided not to go to work, because if Adrian wanted his stuff, he was going to look me in the eye. So I paced the kitchen, rehearsing a calm but firm speech about how his reaction was way out of scale and how I'd forgive him if he apologized. When he finally walked in, he looked tired and far away, like somebody wearing my husband's face, and I stepped into the hallway to block the bedroom and said we needed to talk, he said quietly. There was nothing to talk about, which made me flare up because vanishing for 3 days over a joke didn't qualify as nothing. And then he just looked at me in a way that made the room feel colder and said it wasn't a joke, it was public humiliation, and it wasn't the first time. I told him not to be so sensitive, and he told me to stop, firm enough that I froze. Then said he came to get his things, and he'd be at the hotel until he found an apartment. That's when it hit that he was serious, so I asked if he was really leaving over this, and he took a breath and said he was leaving because he finally realized I don't respect him and never have. I called that unfair and tried to downgrade it to harmless teasing, and he said it's not teasing when the goal is to get a laugh at his expense, and that it wasn't just that one line, it was everything. The way I talk about him to friends, the way I brush off how he feels, the way I take credit for work he does. I felt my face heat up and I asked who had been putting ideas in his head, and that's when he pulled out his phone and opened a folder, dozens of screenshots, messages between me and Brooke going back months, full of the exact lines I'd told myself were private jokes, timestamps, little reactions, even times I'd bragged about making it to bit in front of people. He scrolled through them slowly, not gloating, just laying out a timeline, and as I watched my own words stack up, I could hear my excuses getting thinner. New Year's, the jar comment, the backyard cookout where I told Sabrina and Evan he tries hard for a guy who doesn't lift, the group text where I joked about him needing a step stool to reach the top shelf, even a note where I said he'd overcooked the roast, but I took the compliments because why not? And I stood there in the hallway of our shiny, remodeled house, realizing this wasn't one crack in an otherwise perfect wall. It was a line I'd crossed over and over because I liked the laugh, and now the person I kept using for the punchline was packing a bag and planning a different future without me. He held up his phone and said quietly, "This is what I mean." And on the screen were my chats with Brooke, line after line of me making snarky cracks about Adrian's body, his performance, the things he's sensitive about, stuff I'd shared in what I thought was private best friend space. My stomach flipped, and I snapped, asking how she could show him our conversations, calling it a betrayal, and he answered, without raising his voice, that she acted like a real friend once she finally saw how toxic I'd been. The word hit me like a slap, and I fired back that I'm his wife, as if the title alone excused everything, and he said, "Not for much longer," then walked past me to the bedroom and started packing slowly, methodically, shirts folded, toiletries zipped into a dop kit like he'd rehearsed this. I hovered in the doorway, telling him he couldn't be serious, that he was tossing a marriage over some texts and one joke, and he stopped, met my eyes, and asked if I could hear myself, saying I'd broken trust in the most humiliating way and had been doing it for years. He just hadn't connected the dots until now. I tried to shift the blame to Brooke, saying she'd betrayed me, and he closed the suitcase and said it wasn't on her, it was on me, and the fact I still couldn't see, that was exactly why he was leaving. As he headed for the door, I shouted that he'd be back, asking where he'd even go because this was his home, and he paused with his hand on the knob and said, "Not anymore," then left me standing in the echo of my own house, furious at him, furious at Brooke, furious at everyone for casting me as the villain when, in my mind, I was just being honest in a world where most people won't say what they really think. I didn't realize how much worse it could get until the whisper network kicked in. And, by week's end, the whole friend circle knew we were on a break, my phrase. And I tried steering the story by telling people he was thin-skinned about a harmless joke, but their replies made it obvious they'd already heard his version. I tossed a post on Facebook. Sometimes the person you thought would stay walks when things get hard, standing strong, expecting sympathy hearts and "you got this" comments, but it pulled 3 polite likes from acquaintances and nothing from our inner circle. I called Chloe next, figuring she'd get it since she'd sparked the toy comment in the first place, and after I vented, she said my line was pretty bad. I said it was a joke, and she asked whether I'd find it funny if Adrian made a crack about my body in front of everyone, and I rolled my eyes and said that was different, that guys are supposed to take a joke, and she answered that the problem was it didn't feel like a joke. It felt mean. Even Chloe not taking my side stung, so I cut the call and tossed my phone on the couch. The following morning, I went back to the office to chase some normal, but the vibe had shifted. Conversations dipped when I walked in, smiles stretched too tight, people got extra polite and oddly distant, and then I spotted Brooke in the break room, and it clicked because we work in different departments at the same company, and I convinced myself she'd been spreading her truth at work. I cornered her by the coffee machine and asked if she was enjoying wrecking my life, and she blinked like I'd splashed her, said she didn't know what I meant, and I accused her of turning Adrian against me and poisoning the office. She dropped her voice and said she hadn't told anyone at work, and that showing him the messages wasn't betrayal, but the right thing to do given how I kept tearing him down. And I felt my eyes burn as I told her I thought we were friends. And she said she thought so too until she saw how I treat people, then stepped around me. From behind I heard a quiet "yikes," and when I turned to, co-workers scattered like they hadn't been listening, leaving me alone with a cooling cup, a humming fridge, and the new, heavier reality that outside my own head I wasn't being seen as brave or honest. I was the person who made her husband the punchline and then acted shocked when the room stopped laughing. When I got home that night, an email from Adrian sat at the top of my inbox with one word in the subject line: divorce. And just like that, there wasn't a talk, a pause, or a chance to cool down, only a formal note saying his attorney would reach out and a bullet list of household items he wanted. And that's when it finally sank in, that this wasn't a bluff or a cooling-off period. My husband was actually leaving over what I still kept calling one dumb comment. I tried calling and hit voicemail, so I texted asking if we could at least talk before lawyers got involved. And an hour later, he replied that there was nothing to discuss, and that I'd already shown him who I really was. I fired back, asking what that was supposed to mean, and he wrote that I was someone who never respected him, who used his insecurities for laughs, and that he deserved better. That line lit me up, So I dragged Brooke into it and said she'd turned him against me. And he shot back that it was always about me, and he just hadn't seen it until now. I tossed my phone harder than I meant to, and watched a crack bloom across the screen, the way the rest of my life felt like it was splitting, and I still couldn't wrap my head around why I was the only one catching blame. 2 months later, everything was a different shape. Papers moving forward, him refusing to meet unless attorneys were present, me packing up because I couldn't cover the mortgage on my own, and learning the hard way how much more he'd been paying without ever making a big deal about it. And now, I'm in a small Houston apartment that feels more like a stopover than a home, while the place we built is no longer mine. The friend circle split down the middle, with most of them still seeing Adrian, while I get an occasional courtesy coffee, where his name never comes up but hangs in the pauses anyway, and I can tell they compare notes the minute I'm gone. Work isn't a refuge either. Brooke landed the promotion I was in the running for. Everyone congratulated her with warm smiles, and I got the quiet side glances that say, people know more than they'll admit. Plus, the office rumor mill says Adrian's thriving in the new role, that the travel I grumbled about has turned into a big opportunity. And then last week, the gut punch arrived when Evan accidentally included me on a group text about a dinner party, and I saw Adrian's name followed by +1 Zoe, and that tiny line in a blue bubble made it crystal clear he wasn't circling back to the past with me. He was already writing something new. A quick scroll through his socials told me exactly who Zoe is. Put together, doing well for herself, and, judging by the comments under her posts, the kind of genuinely kind person people actually like, and in every photo she's looking at Adrian like he hung the moon, like she truly respects him. I tried venting to my mom, figuring she'd take my side, but instead she asked one question that's been bouncing around my head ever since. Honey, do you ever think maybe you were wrong? Wrong how, I thought, because in my mind I cracked a joke and everyone else blew it out of proportion. Adrian could have talked to me instead of bolting. Brooke could have stayed loyal instead of handing him our private messages. And the friend group could have backed me instead of lining up behind him. Sure, I can admit I shouldn't have said that particular thing in front of everyone, but to torture marriage over it, to wreck my friendships and my name and my day-to-day life, how does that make sense? Then last night I see on Instagram that Adrian picked up another promotion, him grinning with an arm around Zoe. #blessed. And the comments are all congrats, including from people who barely text me back anymore. I scrolled through old photos of us when I thought we were solid and started asking myself if it really was all on me, because everyone seems sure it is, everyone except me. Yet some nights, when the place is quiet, I wonder if they're right, that I took him for granted, that I said things I shouldn't, that I didn't realize what I had until it slipped away. But then I remember how fast he walked out, how quickly the circle turned their backs, and the anger flares up again. So here I am, alone in a small apartment, watching my old life roll on without me. Adrian thriving, our friends smiling, even Brooke moving up. Everybody happy except me, all over one joke that went too far. It doesn't feel fair, not even close, though somewhere deep down, in a spot I'd rather not acknowledge, there's a whisper I can't mute that says, maybe this is fair. Maybe this is exactly what I brought on myself. Not that I'd admit that to anyone. Not even to me. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city are you watching.